Luis, we've spent a fair amount of time over the years talking about content, and one of the things that Unilever has reminded me and the marketplace of is a unique circumstance, and that circumstance is the roughly 2 billion people a day who touch a Unilever product. And as we talk about content and distribution, my question to you is, do you subscribe to the view that other marketers do, that you're a network yourself with 2 billion people a day watching or using or interacting with your products? How do you look at that as network effect?
Absolutely. So I do believe that our brands touch every single consumer and in every single part of the world. So the fact that we have this huge network of consumers interacting with our brands at the end is such a powerful content in terms of their interacting with our brands in a great brand experience. We have been in this business of providing content to consumers for ages. So I believe that this is in our DNA, and we will continue doing that. So reaching our consumers and allowing them to interact as a network all over the place is in our roots.
So Luis, you told me a story earlier as a student of history about something special about the very city we're in here in Montreux, Switzerland. Would you share a little bit of history for us? I thought it was very interesting fact.
Yeah, no, that's just a funny story that we were talking about here in Switzerland about branded entertainment content or the concept of content. And in 1898, more than 100 years ago, it was shot here in Switzerland, a piece of content that is called Washing Day in Switzerland, and it was shot by the Lumiere brothers, that it was the inventor of modern cinema. And our brand Sunlight was there. So more than 100 years ago, we were there producing content. And if we just leapfrog to today, to the new fragmentation world, we just this year pioneered a partnership with Apple in the launch of the iAd platform. So more than 100 years ago, today we are still developing content in what available platform formats or are in the market.
Yes, John.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about what Luis is saying, besides that they reach 2 billion people, is that many media companies, particularly if you're in the television business, you are a wholesaler. You actually never met your customers, your viewers, your consumers, so to speak. You wholesaled through somebody. And I think in the digital age, the companies that have direct relationships with consumers are the people with the power. And I think we're seeing that in lots of different ways. Luis just mentioned one. Yahoo, I believe, has around 600 million users. But that's a big change. That's a big change from before, because you could be just a wholesaler and live behind, that distribution chain in the past. And I think in going forward, that puts you at risk.
So you talk about 600 million users, John, and it's a daunting number, and it's a real number. Rich, I turn to you with a question. The internet, per se, was supposed to allow for the democratization of content and the distribution, not only in a consumer-generated form, but just the distribution of content, whether it's professional or consumer-generated, without the same gatekeeping that existed when I started out as a practicing attorney in the entertainment business. There were 3 people you had to know. Mm-hmm. ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that's right. How you got your content online in front of the public. And today that doesn't necessarily exist by any stretch of the imagination. You're a portal. You've got 600 million people looking at Yahoo. Are you creating content, or are you aggregating content, and how do you see that role played out?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's almost 700 million users now, we're proud to say. And, we are a global leader in a number of content verticals, finance, news, sports, et cetera. And I think one of the reasons for that is that several years ago we realized aggregating generic content wasn't going to, in itself, create the most compelling consumer experience. So we create unique content by having hundreds of bloggers and doing daily videos and shows and things like that. We do social content, where almost 20% of our users end up contributing content back into the experience, whether it's uploading a Flickr photo, commenting on an article, things like that. Crowdsourced content, where we have almost 400,000 contributors, contributing almost 2,000 pieces of content per week back into the network. And of course, advertiser content, where, for example, in Latin America, we partner with Unilever to create cooking channels, which are incredibly popular. So it's the blend of all of those sources of content, optimizing it, curating it with human editors that we think creates the most compelling online experiences.
So to that end, when you use the example in Latin America, I'm curious in terms of the constituents around the table. As you just articulated it, you're working directly with Unilever to create that content. Is there a creative agency in the middle of that conversation, or is it a Yahoo Unilever direct conversation?
Yeah, there are so many people on the table. So we have, of course, our relationship, but we have creative agencies, media agencies, PR agencies, and all the industry. So
don't forget your consultants.
And your consultant as well. Yeah. But at the end, is as well the consumer on the table, because when we co-create this content, as he mentioned, we have content sometimes that is coming from Unilever, from the agencies, from professional chefs, but at the same time, the consumer, as we just saw in the previous session, are the one populating this channel. The secret here is, for us, is to provide an always-on strategy to communicate in every single day with our consumers in every single platform available.
And Rich, from your perspective, do you look at it the same way in terms of that? And it's a critical relationship. Wenda asked the question, I think Jerry answered it, in terms of how the structure 10 years from now will look between client and agency.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying for us, it's a win-win-win in terms of getting content that our consumers actually want, that make our services better, and deliver a brand message, make an advertiser happy. And so that lets us really unleash our editorial distribution and forces to drive traffic to the content, which creates more engagement, et cetera. So for us, this is really the optimal model. And we work with everybody around the table, like you said, to make that happen. So it's a lot of people in the conversation.
Everybody sings Kumbaya and grabs hands? I mean, is that really what's happening?
Well, there's always a lot of opinions and a lot of work and a lot of urgency, but in the end, we've done this on a lot of sites and with a lot of partners, and you can absolutely make it work.
So, and I think it also is a true story that in some cases, some of our partners, either agencies or other kind of partners, they don't believe in one project, and we as Unilever say we still wanted to do it, and we move ahead. We move ahead with a media vendor, or we move ahead just creating a platform with a technology company. So of course we have that dialogue, and we respect every single views, but at the end of the day we need to be responsible for our decisions in front of our shareholders.
John, I want to jump for a second as we're talking about content, and certainly we'll come back to this part of the discussion, but the models. Rupert Murdoch threw the gauntlet down with print now just about 2 years ago, in terms of I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, in a very positive way in terms of people having to pay for content. You've been at the forefront of this now in your role at News Corp, and how are you finding that minefield in terms of starting with the Wall Street Journal and other publications, and most recently with the launch of the Daily in the United States, around a paid content model and a paywall, if you will?
So I think we've probably been maybe the most vocal company on this subject. And the way I like to think about it is dual revenue streams. If you look at the history of the media business, dual revenue stream models work. In the American broadcasting industry, it used to be that the three names that Michael mentioned at the beginning, like ABC, CBS, NBC, and then Fox, the big networks were the healthy, huge companies. Now, frankly, they don't make anywhere near the kind of money that the cable networks with their dual revenue streams make. So I think the grail for the entire media industry is how do you get to dual revenue stream businesses. If you're just supported by one thing, you're at risk. And I think we've taken the biggest stands on that. The Journal is in a Wall Street Journal, really interesting position. It's got about 1 million digital subscribers, which is much more than probably anybody else in the newspaper industry. But at the same time as that, it's increased its print circulation. It's now the most popular newspaper in the United States by any measure. It passed USA Today last year. So the Journal has increased not only its traditional print business, but also is the leader in digital subscriptions. And that is a healthy business model. and one that we'd like to emulate, and I think others like to emulate. Part of the reason the Journal can do that is that it has really valued content. There's no question that that content is valued by an important segment. So the Journal is actually in very good shape. Then a few months ago, we launched something called The Daily. And The Daily is the first purpose-built publication for the tablet world. We launched on the iPad. And it doesn't exist in the print world. It doesn't exist online or didn't exist online. It was made for that medium. And I think what's exciting about that is that it's not what I call a line extension. It's not taking something from over here and pushing it over there and changing it a little bit to fit something. We made it and designed it from the ground up to be unique for the iPad experience. And by the way, it'll expand into other things over time. But the key was to just do it fresh. And it really, I think, makes the most of that medium. And right now, as far as we're aware, and what Apple tells us is we're the leading subscription publication in their new subscription service with The Daily. And here's the interesting fact about it. So we offer weekly subscriptions and yearly subscriptions. And there may be other offers over time. But the trend line is for the yearly to pass the weekly very shortly now. And so there'll be more people signing up on a yearly basis than a weekly basis. And that's something we didn't anticipate. And that's good for us, but it's good for the model going forward, that you can get people to sign up for full-year contracts, if you will, to new publications.
And the price point is, as I recall,
it's $1 a week and $39.99 a year.
Luis.
Reasonably priced, I might add.
Reasonably priced, right. Luis, in the opening, I mentioned the word storytelling. And obviously, from a marketer's perspective, in every message, you're telling a story of some sort. How do you see that applying into the creation of content yet on another level? Again, I believe your marketing messages are content, but let's talk about longer form content. And a brand's role in helping the storytelling in longer form content.
Absolutely. So we live in a really fragmented world, and we need to generate an always-on strategy on content. And that content needs to be meaningful and needs to be resonant to every single consumer in order to penetrate the culture at a local or global level. And the form and shape of content could be in any size. Could be short films, could be long films, could be, in some cases, co-created with consumers. Could be sometimes our brands are just the enablers for the consumers to create that content, as we have the case of the Mo Film festival that we recently had with our brands. And in some cases, we are the ones that just deliver all the content. So I think that there is no one single approach, and in some cases, and we have our internal session today because we have our all global media director from Unilever here in this festival, and we talk about this about content. And Rob Master, that is the head of media for Americas, says about this word about buy, build, and borrow. So there are different approaches on how you manage content. In some cases, you just buy what is available. In some cases, you build what is available. You build your own content. In some cases, you borrow from consumers. So there is no one single approach. But what is one single thing is that the story that you provide to the consumer should resonate into the heart in order to mobilize him to buy our brands.
So, Rich, what I would say to you is, do you think the storytelling has to change? To John's point, The Daily was created as something new, not a line extension, but something new for that medium. Do you think storytelling changes from your perspective? And are you, to the question I asked earlier, how much of your own content do you think you need to create at Yahoo?
Yeah, I think it's definitely evolving. For us, I'll take the unrest in the Middle East as an example. Years ago, we would have had sort of the licensed generic headline, and we would have had it fairly quickly, but not instantly. And today, world class on something like that to us is, it's instantly on the homepage so people know that something's happened, and then you very quickly have not only the sort of general facts, but you have, the word from people on the street. And you really have, you round out the news with not just one press release or whatever, but with people on the street, and then for us to then get that distributed worldwide. So that's how we apply a human layer of editorial on top of these multiple, content sources to tell the story in a constantly evolving, kind of real-time, authentic, real way.
Go ahead.
I mean, another let's take two extremes of storytelling, and I think it shows how quickly things are evolving. Like you're saying, the unrest in the Middle East, who knew that storytelling would be 140 characters at a time? You know, a few years ago, I don't think anyone would have believed it if you said that's how you'll learn about events in the world, 140 characters at a time, and people would say you don't even know what you're talking about. So that's one extreme, is sort of the short bursts, and then go all the way to the other. The film Avatar, which happens to be a Fox released film 2 years ago, and the way that the 3D was incorporated not as an effect, but really the fabric of that movie, and changed the entire storytelling process and the whole filmic process to create that. I mean, that is a completely highly produced narrative 2-hour plus experience, immersive experience. So I think you have all this going on at the same time, and those are just two of the extremes, but it's all happening at once, and you have to figure out how you play inside of that and make the best of where you feel comfortable in your storytelling.
We're talking about numbers for a moment. I would turn to Luis and say, Luis, there's obvious ways you can measure content at retail and through the sales channel, but how are you valuing or measuring the success of content that is getting created in the context of what we're talking about here, online, on a mobile device? Are you subjecting it to the same measurement you did historically? Are you being more tolerant, less tolerant?
I think that at the end we have plenty of tools to measure the output of the different things that we are integrated in our communication plans. But there is one single measurement that is the one that we track, that is the outcome of what we do. And the outcome of what we do is if our brand succeeds in the market and grows market share. That is the ultimate expression of the success of our plans. So, of course, we have in the middle a set of tools because right now we live in a time where we can measure everything. And this is something that we have the opportunity right now to embrace. We can measure everything. But the final measurement for us is how we are going to transform and change consumer behavior towards our brands. And market share is the one that the last measurement.
Well, a payoff question, Luis, would be, you're the world's, at least according to everything I read, the world's second largest marketer. Are you satisfied with the tools that are out there for you to measure today? I mean, as you recently took on a global role, are you satisfied as you look around?
What I will say is right now we have thousands of millions of independent tools. And of course, what we need to have is this kind of integrated pay, own and earn, on and offline. Because at the end of the day, the consumer is just one, and we just need to see how all of this multi-platform, multi-content message that we put in place, all of them towards one single thing. That is the pay, own and earn, on and offline. So this is the area that I think that we still need to work in the industry, because we have plenty of isolated tools that are in place. But the one that I still think that is a huge opportunity in the market is integrating all of this.
And to that point, I think if we could, as an industry, figure out how to specifically integrate television and online video viewing so that people like Luis and his team could look across that and be able to see the impact on an audience, how they're buying, and have an integrated buying and reconciliation campaigns, that would be a big deal. Because right now, you can buy television and you can buy video spot online, but you can't figure out what you did between them except much later after the fact. And I think that would be a big deal for a lot of companies and the industry as a whole.
Rich, do you
Yeah, we still feel like we only get credit sometimes if someone clicks on something, which seems like an awful shortchanging of the impact of telling a brand story and a message and the whole process. So I think there's still plenty of evolution to go in the measurement.
So John, let me ask you a question, and this wasn't in anything we discussed, but I would presume this wouldn't be a test you would have had to study for. So, as a media visionary, I'm hoping I can throw this one your way. More than Yahoo, certainly, although Yahoo fits into this same category, you at News Corp are both a very large buyer of media as an advertiser for News Corp, with Fox and the various outlets, and you're also a very large seller.
Correct.
As we talk about the metrics and we talk about the measurement, it's sort of like a two-headed monster. How do you reconcile that internally, or even to yourself when you look at it on both sides?
First of all, that's a great and actually difficult question. So I figured whenever there was a difficult question, I would get out my candy bar here, and I could at least buy 30 seconds trying to eat it, right? Because I think what it really goes to is as you're saying, you're both a buyer. In a case like ours, we're a buyer and a seller. We are a very large marketer, to over $1 billion spent across the company, and then some to market our services, and at the same time we sell a lot of media. And the only way that will ever work, I think, for everybody is you have to use the same metrics across all of that, because you have to know which master you're serving when you're serving them. And I think, frankly, that's been one of the issues in the online world, where you're trying to so-called optimize. But optimize, who are you optimizing for? Are you optimizing for yourselves or for your marketing partners or someone else? And so whatever it is, you have to figure out your metrics and you have to live by them. And I think that's the key. They both have to be your buying and your selling metrics. So on the buy side, we, like everybody else, we look to maximize the value of the money that we spend and to reach the biggest audiences. And we use our content in many ways to do that as well, and to get reach out there, because content is also marketing. And on the sell side, we sell across, obviously, television and print, and many other, and sponsoring of movies and many different things. And so we have to use the same systems and the same kind of buying and metrics related stuff. But that's the only way to get through it, because otherwise it gets very confusing. You can't be selling one way on one hand and buying a different way on the other. So I suppose it keeps you honest.
Thank you. You can have your candy bar now, John. Rich, we talked earlier about content and marketing. Do you think that advertising per se can actually be content as you deliver it? I mean, do you feel that as you look at the landscape from a Yahoo perspective?
We do. I mean, we're constantly trying to get the consumer experience to be as relevant as possible, which includes the content and the advertising, and then increasingly there's blurring of the two. So whether we're working directly with advertisers for sponsorships, creating content, et cetera, we want to create as relevant of consumer experience as possible, and to have advertising be an integrated part of that, not just a rectangle that's been sort of inserted into a page of content.
Speaking of that, and I make this a jump ball, I'll start with you though, Rich. Do you think that technology and science can actually change content? I mean, at the end of the day, the science versus art argument that we continually have, do you think that the science and technology part can really impact the art?
Yeah, well, I think technology is a huge part of it. I mean, for us, we have 200 petabytes of data, which grows at the rate of U.S. Library of Congress every 4 days. So one, just having all this, in an accessible grid and cloud where you can actually do something with it is quite a technological challenge. And then the second is optimizing that content for users. So, we serve up 13 million different variations of our homepage every day, because we're trying to be relevant at the individual level. So it takes a lot of technology to be able to do something with all this content and make it relevant. So I think technology is a critical foundation, but I do think art maybe gets less conversation than it should, in that we have the technology, the scale, and the science, but art is such an important part of what we do. And for us, it's one of the fastest growing parts of our advertising business, in that you now can deliver very high impact advertising in the online environment, and sight, sound, and motion, and take over pages and do things that go way beyond the North Banner of just a few years ago. So we think art maybe gets sort of undersold these days.
Well, consistent with what I said earlier, I absolutely think so to your question. In fact, I'd go further and say that I think you can't divorce the media and the technology any longer. Go back to Avatar. Avatar was designed for a large theatrical experience. It is just not the same on your smartphone or your wristwatch TV. That is not how to view Avatar, and it was never meant to be that way. It's designed, and if you talk to Jim Cameron, the filmmaker, he will tell you he wanted people to go into theaters to see the film. And the technology that was deployed was designed to do exactly that. At the same time, when you look at other things like the Daily, it uses 360 photography with the iPad, that literally, as you move your iPad around in space, it rotates the picture. and it's designed for that medium. So I actually think that in fact, it's not merely convergence, but the experiences are designed for each other and are part of the same experience. So I don't think you can separate those two anymore.
What I will add on this is that technology right now, on top of transforming every single industry, and of course our industry in the media, technology in our industry allow us to unlock the situation between mass and personalization. So I do believe that technology allow us to reach mass audiences, but at the same time have a very level of deep personalization with every single consumer. And technology is the one that has enabled and has unleashed that potential for us to embrace in our communication plans.
Well, but Luis, you just invited the elephant into the middle of the room because the personalization raises the issue that is, becoming ever more important around the world. Certainly in Europe, there's been a gigantic focus on it, and in the U.S., a bill was just introduced in Congress today, I think, on the do not track, challenges. So the privacy issue, and it's pervasive, I think, in every one of these conversations. Right. Where do you, look, there's nothing that I've ever experienced more than the thirst for data and information from a marketer standpoint, and yet you have to balance it. Yeah. How do you look at it, first of all, from a Unilever perspective?
There is a trade-off in the industry that either we look for personalization, but as well you need to give some data, because otherwise you are not in the system. So I think that over time, consumers will realize which are that point where they are willing to provide their own data in order to receive much more personalized content to them. And I think that is a genuine debate, and I think that we as a industry and the law as well need to be on this. I don't think that there is a solution. There is something that there will be a trade-off where some consumers are not willing to give any data, and some others say, I'm willing to give everything because I really want to have a personal experience. And when I'm searching, I really want to have something that is meaningful for me.
Yeah, this is going to go on for a long time. It's a real issue because there are benefits to personalization, and there are also the need to protect privacy. Those two things are obvious. But let's take two examples. When Gmail first came out by Google, if you typed the word water, all of a sudden there'd be an ad that would appear on the side, about offering you some bottled water. And people felt that was really spooky because it was happening literally as they were typing. Now, that was a machine that really didn't know anything about you. It was just doing word matching. But it felt, as a consumer, it felt pretty weird. And I didn't personally like it. On the other hand, when you go to Amazon and you've bought stuff from Amazon over a period of time and they recommend things, they're really good at it. I always buy stuff from Amazon that I did not expect to get. I go for one thing and I end up buying 3 things because their recommendation engine is really good. And they know a lot more about me. That's not just word matching. They've looked at my buying habits and buying habits of other people, and they've done collaborative filtering, it's called, and they match it up. But it's a great service, and I appreciate it. So Amazon is actually taking more private information and personal information from me than the Google example, but using it in a way that seems like a benefit to me. Whereas in the Google example, when they did it then, they actually didn't have much personal information. They were just, as I said, word matching, but it felt weird. So part of it is these services have to develop to the point where the consumer feels that they're getting a real benefit. It's not spooky and feels like it's violating them. And in fact, it shouldn't be violating them. And those will continue to develop over time.
So is it simple enough, and Rich, I clearly want your opinion on this, but is it simple enough to say, in that context, you bought something on Amazon, Amazon has directly communicated back to you, that's less spooky, I guess, than you buying something on Amazon and getting a third party that has nothing to do with the relationship you've created with Amazon, now all of a sudden offering you, I presume at the heart of it would be that, value exchange. And go for it. Or not. We can move on.
Well, I'll give you a Yahoo perspective on privacy. So, clearly trust for all of us is critical to our brands, and we have to stay on it's the consumer perception that matters. The good news is that most of us are incredibly responsible with all of this data. And so we think and are pushing from an industry perspective that, transparency, and choice as well are one of the ways we demonstrate this responsibility and build this trust with consumers. So for example, saying, we think you're interested in movies, but if you're not, feel free to change that, or if you don't want us to think like that, you can tell us that also, but show that we're just trying to provide a more relevant experience and certainly not do anything uncomfortable for anybody. So we hope through that we can also stay self-regulated as an industry and continue to move forward, gaining trust and providing more relevant experiences in advertising.
And one of the big next steps is location-based services. I mean, it came out a couple of weeks ago that there were reports that Apple was the iPhones were tracking where you were like every I forget whether it's 15 seconds or 15 minutes reporting back and that Apple was keeping that data. That was denied by Apple. But it still raises the general question of, now we do so much with our phones and they can track us, and there's great services. You might want to know about deals in your area when you're in a specific place and shopping for specific things. You can get information that you otherwise wouldn't have. That's a great service. On the other hand, it's a little spooky to think that there's a device that you carry in your pocket that is literally telling someone else where you are every few seconds. And so those boundaries have not yet been defined, and it hasn't been tested yet by a great marketing service. I think we'll find it being tested when someone comes out with a really good service that has benefits to people, but also still doing this kind of tracking, and that hasn't happened yet.
John, I want to go back to something you said about Jim Cameron and Avatar and his creating that content and the experience to be consumed effectively in a theater on a large screen, knowing that there would be ancillary opportunities, but his prime directive in Star Trek terms would be to have had people enjoy that in a theater. As we've started to see on a global basis, the windowing of content whittling down, and for those of you who don't understand the concept, just the idea of a theatrical release followed by the pay-per-view, followed by the home entertainment release, etc.
By the first pay window, the second pay window,
and those windows, collapsing, and Jim Cameron, actually the same person, is leading a consortium of other filmmakers to say, hell no, this is not what we want. I mean, at the end of the day, there's two issues. One is, who's right here? I mean, the consumer is saying, I'd like it now, this way, at this point, and the filmmakers, led by Jim Cameron, but he had a host of other major, Academy Award-winning, stellar filmmakers joining in, saying, no way, we want this. What do you think?
Well, I think just to be clear, what's being talked about, they call it now the premium VOD window, which is a window that pretty close to the theatrical release, the theater release, you can get it at home at a high price, say $30, something like that. And this has caused controversy in the industry. The industry has traditionally made a lot of money by the process of windowing, segmenting who gets what rights along a chain, and that has worked very well for frankly everybody involved. And this is one of the ways it can break down. I think personally that the films that will be most affected by this in a positive way are the films that don't stay long in the box office, don't stay long in the theater. Typically, art films or things like that can't hold on to a screen, so to speak, very long and go away. They still might have an audience, but that audience may not be one that concentrates in a specific area or goes out to the movies much. So I think those are the films that stand to benefit, and I think when you create an experience like Cameron did with Avatar, people are still going to go to the movie theater to see it. So I think it's less at risk for the big pictures, and it can help the other pictures. But obviously, it's a real controversy. I think it's something that happens because I think consumers, personally, my sort of summation of it would be that consumers want it. That if you have the ability to watch certain films in your own home and you're willing to pay for it and invite some friends over, you would like to do that, and I think people will do it.
Yeah, I mean, the predictive modeling that exists could take any film and give you a rough estimate of the revenue it will generate over its lifetime, and you could charge that much and have a day and date release. At the end of the day, the economics are going to be the same. There are people on the value chain that would suffer, but in fact, the ultimate content creators might not. From that standpoint.
And the brand can play a role there as well, providing the content to the consumer. So rather than as you say, waiting for them to suffer, I think that the brands can play a role there, providing the content to the consumer in a different platform, in a different way. So
well, and that was the second part of the question, Luis. So thank you, because when you talked about it, John, as content is being created on so many different levels today, the distribution of that content, forget the time, it's, the windows, but the manner in which it's distributed. We all know that the social experience of going to a movie theater, sitting down, having that communal experience is still a good thing for most people, and I don't think that's going to go away. But yet, in the developing nations, in the sort of, what is it, the brick next to 11, D&E, as Sir Martin Sorrell likes to say, time and again. How do you see the content distribution changing, and then ultimately the role of a marketer in that?
Well, I do think the windows will start to collapse, and the question is, will there be will value be created or lost in that process? But going back in my own career, I started in sports some years ago, and in those days you couldn't have the home team. Okay. You couldn't have the home team games on in a local market because the feeling was people wouldn't go to the arena and watch the team. And then cable came along, and you could have the home team games on if you paid on cable, and that worked fine, and people still went to the arena to watch the games. So that's an analogous situation to the movie theaters, to my mind. So I think it all works out in the end. But the question is, if the windows start to collapse, and there's still money being made, but is that money more or less than was being made before? And I don't think anybody knows that answer. Obviously, all of our jobs is to figure out how to make that answer more, but it isn't clear how it completely plays out.
And Luis, from that perspective, you said it, but how do you see a brand, or Unilever with its multiple brands participating in the distribution of content differently than you have? Obviously, historically, you've bought commercial messages on various platforms, and that's financed the distribution of content. Do you see that continuing? Do you see moving further upstream in that conversation with the creators? How do you look at that?
Yeah, so specifically in the distribution, for example, today we have every single social network that you name it, and we can provide, our brands can play a role there, providing exclusive distributions to our fans. So that could be a particular example.
I'm sure for a small charge, we'd be willing to create a Unilever window for almost any of our content, and be happy to do that.
And we could have it preview on Yahoo. I mean,
absolutely.
Rich, what about how do you look at it as again, a portal, as a primary place where people go to get information, content, and
I think one angle here is that as computing power increases and broadband increases and 4G networks and these devices become...
By the way, one of the tweets asked, how big is a petabyte?
Oh, God. 1,000 terabytes?
Yeah, by the way, who's going to know? You could say anything you want. I mean, who really knows? I'd like a show of hands. Who really knows how big a petabyte is?
It's really big.
It's really big. It's large.
It's massive. Okay, so there's now these, especially I think tablets are an interesting one, where the form factor of the tablet makes some content that wasn't so great to consume on a laptop now pretty great to consume. And so I think there'll be kind of a more open-minded approach to which content's right for which device and what's the economic model, and we'll see a lot more choice as more and more devices are IP-enabled and these things move along.
And I do think whether you believe in dual revenue streams and what should be charged or whatever model you believe in, you do have to believe that over time that you have to make your product more available rather than less available. I mean, that's just the direction. And if you need any evidence of that, go back to the music industry when they tried to make their product less available as the digital age came upon them. So the trend line is clear. The question is, what are the economics underneath that, and how do we get to sustainable models for the industry as a whole?
Guys, what I'd like to do now is if it's okay, throw some questions from the audience our way, not the prepared ones, but there are microphones walking around. So I would love to open it up to the audience for some questions. You got a great opportunity here with three people who actually know just about everything other than how big a petabyte is. Okay, so just don't ask too many technical questions. It's very big. Do we have microphones out there? I see a question over here. Could you identify yourself?
Philip Jabbour from Starcom Media West. This is about user-generated content and the relationship with brands. Historically, we've been taught people use products and love the brand, and they love the brand based on what advertisers historically gave them the dream and the concept about. I mean, even in today's UGC with developed and mature brands, it's based off of a concept that's in their mind. Going forward, and the more that we sort of lease out the ability for consumers to create the content and almost relinquish that control, do we still define brands the same way? I mean, Jerry was talking about organizational structure over the next 10 years, and I think John mentioned something about 140 characters per content. Long-term planning is literally going to be defined by the ability to predict today what's on tomorrow's status meeting, and not longer than that. So how does that shift the way that brands navigate? They're going to mean different things to different consumers in different markets because they're creating content. They could mean different things for the same consumer in different time zones.
Before you answer the question, the only thing I would put as a subset to that question is, you're correct that you have to be able to sort of look over the horizon or around the corner as you define a brand, but I would say that the technology today allows you to react a lot quicker as changes occur. So you're not locked into a strategy that might have existed previously where you were stuck with it for a period of time. Real-time change is available. That's the only thing I think you would probably put as a PS to that question. Maybe.
No, absolutely. But it's interesting from an advertiser's perspective, especially Luis.
Yep. So I think that in the old model, we in Unilever were the only one generating content, and we believe that we are the guardians of the brand. So nothing that the brand said could be out without our intervention. And we believe that it's like this kind of model. Right now, we live in a space where we absolutely integrate the equity of our brands with our consumers. So I think that, yes, there is a new role of the brand, there is a new era, because we are not right now anymore the exclusive owners of the content of what the brand said. In some cases, as I said before, we enable our consumers to talk about our brands, as we did it in the Mo film. In the previous session, they talk about crowdsourcing. There is an example that Babs Rangaya is there that he created years ago with the Dove Oscar, when we allow consumer to crowdsource content and then distribute it. So again, we are not the only one creating the content, and we are sharing the generation of that with the consumer. That means that the brands are changing, but at the end of the day, brands are there to fulfill ambition for our consumers. And brands, for me, will always be there, but with a different way of communicating.
So I agree with the premise of the question and Luis's answer, but I'm a contrarian by nature. So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, it came out the most valuable brand on earth is? Apple. Has there ever been a more controlling brand and brand management schema than what Apple does? I mean, literally. If you've ever done an event with Apple, you want to know what control is about. It's a good lesson. And we thought we did. We thought we knew. So I mean, the point I'm trying to make is because I essentially agree.
John, coming from you, having worked for Barry Diller and Rupert Murdoch, that says a lot. I'm just saying.
We were put in our place. But I guess my point is that I think both are true. That I think there's going to be many brands that are going to exist through their interactivity, right, with their consumers and defined by it. And then there are going to be some that are going to be done in the more traditional way, and they're going to coexist. I think you have to do what's right for you and your brand.
Yeah, I feel like as the sort of publisher, our job is to give a marketer choice and help bring them solutions. So sometimes you're going to want to be in a certain contextual environment and deliver a message in a certain way, and sometimes you're going to want to follow an audience and won't be worried about if it's UGC environment or a piece of content. So for us, it's more about providing solutions and giving choice, because I agree there'll be a variety of ways of building different brands.
Thanks. So I'm Babs Rangaya at Unilever. This question's for John. Just since you were just named a media visionary, I thought it'd be good to hear from your standpoint what you think the biggest things, biggest trends we should look for in the next 3 to 5 years as it relates to content and really specifically the television model and where you think that's going.
I was going to give you a different answer until you said television. Can I split your question? Okay. So I'm going to state the obvious, but I'm going to try to hopefully give you the reason why on the first question. What's the biggest trend? The biggest trend is mobility. Period. And I think it's not only do we experience that in our daily lives about how much more we're using devices we carry with us, but the biggest thing in the world is that the next billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people that get on the internet are going to primarily get on the internet through mobile devices. That's going to be their primary form of consumption. And this year, 2011, for the first time, more smartphones on a worldwide basis are being sold than PCs. So the switch has come. And so the internet and our connected experience is going to be primarily a mobile experience, literally from this year forward. And as I said, the next multiple billions of people that come online are going to come from, as I say, developing nations and things like that, and they will come on through primarily a mobile experience. So that is bar none the biggest thing. And it affects every level of the industry, and it affects what content you produce, and bring it to this panel, and how you and what marketing messages and things will work in that environment. To huge questions around bandwidth, to privacy, to as we saw in Egypt, if you were following that in February, where they shut down, the mobile internet during the course of the government upheaval there. So that I think is bar none the biggest thing. I think on television specifically, the big question has been called TV everywhere in the United States, which is how do I get all the stuff that I want to see? Am I going to get it in one big bundle that I'm going to pay a fair amount of money for? And the average bundle of video in the United States is north of $90. I found out I'm paying $135 a month recently, which shocked me. Or are you going to get it in a series of kind of more piecemeal things, Netflix and other things, that might amount to a very different economic basis? Those are two very different worlds. And the question is there going to be one? There has been one dominant model, that's the so-called cable model in the United States, the pay bundle. Will that continue to be dominant, or will it start to really be a dichotomy? Because those are very different economics, and it's by far the biggest question in the television industry. And it's happening in the United States now, and I believe it'll play out around the world.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you, especially the guy in the middle.
Thank you, Bob.
I would throw one more question then from the podium. If either one of you or any one of you could tell the folks in the room one stereotype about marketing, media, content, choose one of the three that you'd like to dispel, what would it be?
All right. All content is not created. All content. You want me to dispel one? All right. So the dispelling. All content is created equal. No, I don't believe that. So again, at one extreme, and this goes back to the free versus paid article. Because if all content is created equal, why would you pay for anything? You just might as well get whatever you get. So it goes all the way back to Avatar on the one hand, which certainly is not equal to many other forms of even filmic content and require tremendous investment, to, I think, forms of journalism that also require significant investment. So I don't believe all content is created equal, and I think underneath it there's an interesting further kind of corollary, which is there's UGC on one end and lower price, there's kind of the middle, and then there's very high-end content. And personally, I'm most uncomfortable with the middle. I kind of understand how to have very low cost and lots of it and try to propagate it far and wide. And I kind of feel like I understand high-end content like Avatar or the Wall Street Journal. And I struggle the most with the middle in all the developing trends that we're talking about. If you don't stand out, if you don't provide a unique platform for marketers or a reason consumers need to come to you, but you might still be pretty good, but you don't do that, I think you're in a tough position.
What I will say is that there is no linear approach for success content. So I don't think that is one single model in place. And I think that some people try to simplify sometimes the whole ecosystem and the whole dynamics in this fragmented world and try to come with these 5 steps to do it. So there is no way, no way. The world is much more complex right now as it was years ago. The fragmentation, the technology, and the speed is enormous. So I believe that there is something of the art in the communication that we need to bring back in order to generate this resonant content to our consumers.
And I would say I think we're underutilizing the artistic capabilities of the medium, and that we really can tell a story, build a brand, sight, sound, and motion, high impact advertising, and these capabilities have really advanced over the last couple years and are still being underutilized.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to thank John and Luis and Rich for making the time and hopefully sparking a provocative conversation with the audience. And I'd like to say thank you. And before everybody leaves, I think Charlie or Greg I'm sorry, yes? Is going to come up and say a few words just to bring the conference to a close. But again, thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.